Recently, former State Department spokesperson Matthey Miller admitted that he believes Israel has committed war crimes in Gaza.
I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
With reports accusing the Biden administration of doing nothing to negotiate a ceasefire and save civilian lives, it's hard not to wonder how Biden's foreign policy will unfold over the coming years. Sitting liberals had well over a year to pressure Israel into stopping its assault on civilians, but chose to do nothing and allow a genocide to continue with American weapons. This tacit support has emboldened Israel to the point they are now attacking Iran unprovoked and asking America to join them in going to war with Iran. Could all of this have been avoided if Biden made a quick and decisive decision to end Israel's genocide? I believe Biden could have very easily put an end to Israel's aggression in the region by cutting off all arms deals, but instead he chose to inexplicably support a genocide. Now that Gaza has been flattened, it seems liberals feel the need to clear their conscience, and I don't think they should be allowed this luxury. So today we're going to explore exactly how the Biden administration backed a genocide. The genocide of Palestinians did not start on October 7th. It started with the Nakba in 1948, which was and continues to be a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign of the Palestinian people, violently displacing them from their homes, property, and belongings. Over 500 Arab-majority towns were completely depopulated, and a staggering 750,000 people were either displaced or killed. By the end of the initial surge in 1948, 78% of Palestine was controlled by Israel. What was left of Palestine remained under the control of Jordan and Egypt until 1967 and the Six-Day War. In this war, Israel seized what little land was left of Palestine and has held it under military occupation ever since. Israel has occupied stolen Palestinian land for over 70 years now, and any analysis omitting this fact is simply incomplete and misleading. The Nakba that started in 1948 is still ongoing now, and it is under these conditions that resistance against Israel was born. The simple fact is violent resistance would not be happening against Israel today if Israel had not subjugated Palestine first, and any continued support for Israel is aiding a genocide. With this in mind, let's explore the timeline of how Biden reacted to Israel's continued massacre of civilians. In November of 2023, Biden wrote in an op-ed that a ceasefire is not peace, and accused Hamas of using civilians as human body shields. Openly stating that a ceasefire is not peace kind of gives the game away in my opinion, because definitionally, a ceasefire would end military action until further negotiations could take place. A ceasefire is a necessary step in lasting peace, and without it, continued violence is guaranteed. What makes this lie exceptionally insidious is that Hamas openly stated they were willing to give up control of Gaza to make a ceasefire deal happen, and they were even willing to completely disarm themselves if a Palestinian state was created, which of course Israel refused. Secondly, I'd like to address the claim of Hamas using human body shields. This claim is so ridiculous because Israel was simply indiscriminately bombing civilian infrastructure with zero proof of Hamas activity. Completely destroying schools and hospitals is not anti-terrorist activity, but is a blatant terrorist act itself. Bombing innocent civilians to allegedly kill terrorists is unacceptable and a war crime. Shooting hostages is something Israel is very comfortable doing though, even when it's their own citizens waving a white flag. The next month, December 2023, the United Nations voted in an overwhelming majority to demand a ceasefire in Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to enter the war-torn strip. 153 countries voted for an immediate ceasefire, while only 10 voted against, including the United States and Israel. The United States primarily took issue with the fact that the resolution did not adequately condemn Hamas. No, I'm not kidding. In February of 2024, Biden proudly declared that he hoped to reach a ceasefire agreement in Gaza by the next Monday, but no such agreement was ever made. Quote, "My national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close, it's not done yet, and my hope is by next Monday we'll have a ceasefire." This, of course, directly contradicts new reports that Biden never once pressured Israel to make any such deal. Even at the time Biden said that, Israeli officials responded they were, quote, "surprised that Biden used the word Monday and that he used the word ceasefire," pretty much openly confirming that Biden was not negotiating with Israeli officials at all, but was instead just talking out of his ass. In March March of 2024, a $3.8 billion arms deal was made with Israel, only to be immediately followed by a staggering $8.7 billion arms deal made the next month in April of 2024. This all on top of the static $3.3 billion in aid we send to Israel every year, and none of this includes the $24 billion in foreign military finance contracts we had with Israel at the time. Contracts that allow companies like Raytheon to use mountains of our tax dollars to produce missiles for the Iron Dome defense system. There are so many different military contracts and deals with Israel, it's impossible to list them all here. Congress has the power to block these sales through a joint resolution, but this has never happened. Since October 7th, the United States has sent a staggering $18 billion in extra military aid to Israel, and I'm sure that number will be out of date very soon. This money could have been used on healthcare for Americans. It could have been used for education for Americans. It could have been used to fix the roads. We could have used it for cancer research, or to create new jobs, to revitalize our transportation infrastructure, end homelessness, feed the hungry, make our airplanes safer, lower the cost of utilities, lower the cost of groceries, lower the price of gas. But no. Instead of ever using our own tax dollars to make American lives better, our leaders who are beholden to foreign governments only use it to blow up kids in the Middle East. And we continue to make these arms deals, all while Israeli officials are openly stating the intended goal is to steal Palestinian land and resettle the area. Israeli officials are quoted as saying, "We have to speak to them in the only language they understand, taking their land away from them. And we will hit them where it hurts. Anyone who uses their plot of land to plan another Holocaust will receive from us, with God's help, another Nakba that they will tell their children and grandchildren about for the next 50 years. The explicit stated position of Israeli officials is that the goal of this war is to do another Nakba on the civilians of Palestine and steal their land. I think it should be obvious to everyone that if Israel has enough power to subjugate Palestinians and steal their land, then they are probably not currently suffering a Holocaust, but are in fact enacting one themselves against Palestinian civilians. In September of 2024, Stephen Miller openly conceded that the diplomatic maneuvering was a ploy when he admitted, "We've never wanted to see a diplomatic resolution with Hamas."
But ultimately, we want to see a diplomatic resolution.
But was that the case with Rafah? For instance, not just in Rafah, but
We've never wanted. Hold on. We've never wanted to see a diplomatic resolution with Hamas.
Well, okay. Well, what about the ceasefire?
We wanted to see a ceasefire, but we have always been committed. We have
diplomacy?
always been committed to the destruction of Hamas.
We have always been committed to the destruction of Hamas. He also affirmed that we ultimately want to see a diplomatic resolution to the conflict in the Middle East, which are two diametrically opposed statements. We will never reach peace if our goal is the total destruction of Hamas. We either reach a diplomatic solution with all parties involved, or we shun diplomacy in favor of endless violence. Since Hamas is a party in this conflict, it is impossible to reach a diplomatic solution without including them in the negotiations. Around this same time, senior Biden officials told Israel they support the expansion of military actions in Lebanon, even while Biden pretends to prefer negotiations over violence. In September of 2024, almost 1 year after the genocide of Palestinian people began, ProPublica released a scathing report that revealed the Secretary of State Antony Blinken had intentionally lied to and misled Congress. Antony Blinken had received multiple briefings stating clearly that Israel was blocking U.S. food and medicine shipments from reaching civilians in Gaza. Quote, "This is not only illegal under international law, but makes the United States' continued military support for Israel illegal under international law. This is a reference to the Leahy Law, which explicitly forbids the Department of State and Department of Defense from providing military assistance to foreign units that violate human rights. Because of this law, the Department of State is supposed to properly vet any foreign nation we are supplying with weapons. If any unit is credibly implicated in human rights abuses, the U.S. must deny assistance until proper action is taken by the host nation to bring the responsible parties to justice." With this in mind, it's obvious why Antony Blinken lied, because he wanted to continue sending weapons to Israel so they could continue to commit war crimes with impunity. The reports Antony Blinken had from USAID detailed instances of Israeli interference with aid efforts, including targeting aid workers, razing agricultural structures, bombing ambulances and hospitals, sitting on supply depots, and routinely turning away trucks full of food and medicine. Many of these instances have been confirmed and reported outside of the U.S. aid agency as well, including intentionally bombing aid workers and using siege tactics to starve civilians. With this information readily available, Antony Blinken should have notified Congress that further aid to Israel was illegal under the Leahy Law, but instead Blinken omitted all of this information from his report to Congress and openly lied, saying, quote, "We do not currently assess that the Israeli government is prohibiting or otherwise restricting the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance." A blatant lie. With one simple report, the United States could have easily made weapon sales to Israel illegal because of the Leahy Law. And let's be clear, every single weapons sale to Israel is illegal under our own laws. But government officials in the Biden administration completely falsified their report and lied to Congress so that weapon sales could commence and Israel could continue their genocide. Blinken even went as far as to blame pressuring Israel as the reason the genocide hasn't ended. Quote, "Whenever there has been public daylight between the United States and Israel and the perception that pressure was growing on Israel, Hamas has pulled back from agreeing to a ceasefire and the release of hostages." This is farcical fantasy nonsense, because Israel has said time and time again it will not end its genocide even if all hostages are released. During this time, Biden's State Department took an offensive stance against any sentiment that could be considered anti-Israel. Senior leaders of the State Department repeatedly ignored their own experts when pleas for peace were made. Quote, "They cracked down on leaks by threatening criminal investigation and classifying material that was critical of Israel. 2 human rights officials were prevented from pursuing evidence of abuses in Gaza and the West Bank. This was at a time overwhelming evidence was being released that Israel was physically and sexually abusing its Palestinian victims while it continued flattening residential buildings, schools, and hospitals. One IDF group even reportedly said, 'It's our job to flatten Gaza.' Curiously, the State Department does acknowledge the massive loss of human life and the devastating toll of Israel's military campaign, but argued that American arms have helped advance Western interests in the region, which I can only take as an open admission that the State Department thinks genocide is a key Western value. And when you're right, you're right. This process is eroding what little support the United States had in the Middle East and is galvanizing the region into seeing Americans as bloodthirsty warmongers. The genocide in Gaza has drawn ire from not only Muslim countries, but also the United Nations and International Court of Justice. The ICJ ordered Israel to stop its assault on Rafah because Israel had promised civilians would be safe there. In response, the State Department organized its many lawyers to come up with a legal basis for Israel to continue its attack on a city Israel themselves declared as safe for civilians. In an internal email, State Department lawyers found any way possible to justify these atrocities. Quote, "The State Department has a whole raft of highly paid, very good lawyers to explain, actually, this is not illegal, when in fact it is. Rules for thee, and not for me." When the ICJ ordered Israel to stop its invasion of Rafah, several key State Department officials actually drafted a list of statements acknowledging how important the ICJ is and to express concern over the civilian casualties. But Matthey Miller, the State Department spokesperson, threw them out and sent an email saying the State Department wasn't going to clear any recognition of the ICJ ruling or criticism of Israel. One State Department official said it took a huge amount of effort to use the word condemn when referencing Israeli settlers demolishing Palestinian homes. A quote from a ProPublica article states, "Such sanitizing language became common. Alex Smith, a former contractor with the U.S. Agency for International Development, said that at one point the State Department distributed NSC's list of phrases that he and others weren't allowed to use on internal presentations. Instead of Palestinian residents of Jerusalem, for example, they were meant to say non-Israeli residents of Jerusalem. Pure erasure." During Biden's presidency, he named many red lines that, if crossed, would mean the end of U.S. military transfers to Israel. But when any of these many red lines were crossed, the Biden administration did nothing. These empty threats may have given the Israeli government a sense of impunity. A senior fellow at the Washington Institute said, quote, "Netanyahu's conclusion was that Biden doesn't have enough oomph to make him pay a price, so he is willing to ignore him. Part of it is that Netanyahu learned there is no cost to saying no to the current president. The absolute refusal to follow through on these threats and end military aid to Israel when Israel has crossed every single one of the many red lines will be the defining and most consequential decision of the Biden presidency. There are many examples of Biden vowing to stop supplying Israel with bombs, only to backpedal when Israel inevitably defies the American State Department. Biden vowed to stop sending bombs if Israel invaded Rafah. Biden told Netanyahu he would rethink American aid for Israel if new steps were not implemented to protect civilians after the IDF blew up a World Central Kitchen caravan. And Blinken, Biden's head of state, signaled he would blacklist an IDF unit responsible for the death of a Palestinian American if the soldiers were not brought to justice. In each of these instances, Israel refused to accommodate these requests. Israel did invade Rafah. Israel refused to protect civilians, and no investigation was held against the IDF soldiers responsible for targeting innocent civilians. Netanyahu even made a threat to protect his IDF murderers. Quote, "If anyone thinks they can impose sanctions on a unit of the IDF, I will fight it with all my strength." In every single example of the many red lines Biden and the State Department issued, Israel crossed that red line, and America capitulated to their demands by sending nearly $18 billion in military aid since 2023. One of Biden's final actions before handing the presidency over to Trump was to push out another $8 billion arms deal to Israel. Seriously, he could have codified Roe v. Wade, forgiven student loans, or hell, just sent us all stimmy checks again. But instead of Americans benefiting from our hard-earned tax dollars, Biden sent it all overseas to help Israel bomb as many Palestinians as possible. America's commitment to this death cult goes far beyond any rational or reasonable position. Nancy Pelosi has gone as far as to say, if this Capitol crumbles to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid. I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel. America will be sending money to Israel even after its collapse. Even if Israel causes that collapse by drawing America into World War III, America will continue to send aid. Absolute insanity. It's easier for sitting representatives to imagine the collapse of the entire American government than it is for them to imagine ending weapons deals with Israel. It's really hard to understate how much of a colossal failure the Biden administration was. We all knew that Trump was going to continue this genocide, which is why it was so important for Biden to stop it. And he failed at the most basic moral decision anyone has had to make ever. Do you stop a genocide, or do you fund it and supply said genocide with American tax dollars? Every single person in Biden's cabinet that aided and abetted this genocide should never be allowed to forget the horrific violence their actions caused. And if we lived in a just world, every single one of them would be on trial for their crimes. I can't understand how these government officials can sleep at night knowing they obfuscated the truth to aid Israel in its endless targeting of civilians. If they are just going to allow Israel to do whatever it wants to any neighbor, why do they pretend to be interested in negotiating a peaceful solution? A majority of Americans who voted for Biden wanted weapons transfers to halt, but Biden continued them anyway. These actions also deeply hurt Kamala in the election. Her refusal to break away from Biden's foreign policy was a huge deterrent to any anti-war voter. No matter how hard he tried, Biden could not justify the unjustifiable and made himself look like a fool by pretending to negotiate peace deals while sending unlimited arms to Israel. He pretended he wanted an end to the bloodshed but continued sending the weapons used to spill the blood. He gaslit the world by acting as if the most powerful nation on the planet is powerless in ending this genocide, and it gave us another Trump presidency. If Biden had directed the State Department to release all reports of humanitarian violations and immediately made weapons sales to Israel illegal under the Leahy Law, followed by negotiating an actual ceasefire agreement, I genuinely believe he would have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and heralded as one of the greatest presidents of all time. But Biden's undying support for Israel has doomed us all to an inexplicably stupid dictator. If we don't want people to violently resist oppression, then we should simply stop oppressing them. The Biden administration did not fail to negotiate a ceasefire, they simply never tried.